The Royals have signed an old name from their past. What does it mean? We'll tell you in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always catch me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you listen to podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For the new listeners out there wondering how this channel works, we bring you episodes Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes, of course. And then we also have our 60-second YouTube shorts that we post after all of the Royals games. And now we have the Royals postcast, which I did host the last two nights, but you can pretty much expect Chance Lebo to be doing that the rest of the way. Unless something were to come up, then I'll always be able to fill in. But Chance does the Royals postcast, which is coming to you live after each and every Royals game for about 15 minutes or so. You can be in the comment section on StreamYard. It's a lot of fun, especially after a Royals walk-off like last night. So you can count on that after tonight's game between the Royals and the Pirates. You can leave questions and comments below in this YouTube video if you want to talk about the Royals more in depth, if you got a segment idea, or if you just have a question for me. We usually like to save those for a Mailbag Friday. But if you have one now, I'd be more than happy to answer it before tomorrow's episode. Now, to dive into this episode today, we actually have a transaction to talk about. As it was reported from Jeff Passan this morning that the Royals had signed Dallas Keuchel to a minor league deal. Nothing more than depth, in my opinion. I know there's going to be speculation about, well, why would the Royals go out there and sign another pitcher very similar to Rich Hill and an older name guy that's still trying to stick around and get back to the big leagues? In my opinion, it's purely based on depth, which the Royals have none of anymore now that Cole Ragans is on the injured list. You're in those trade talks, or at least people are talking about trades involving Seth Lugo, Michael Lorenzen maybe. There's not many guys they can turn to in Triple A. In fact, there's nobody they can turn to at this point in time to pull from Triple A if they were to deal someone like Lugo or deal someone like Michael Lorenzen. So why Dallas Keuchel, right? Dallas Keuchel pitched a little bit last year for Milwaukee, only made about, I think, 2 or 3 appearances, if I can recall correctly. He has not posted any good numbers since prior to 2020. I mean, it's been a long time since Dallas Keuchel produced numbers at a high rate for an extended period. The reason I say that is he did post good numbers in the COVID year for the White Sox. It was also the COVID year. So he's had seasons after that where he pitched well in the first half or pitched well for an extended period of time that would have matched the COVID year. But over the course of 162, it just wasn't that good. But he was hosting a workout, I want to say last week, I believe it was last week, where he was running it up to about 92 per Passan's report. And if you can remember Dallas Keuchel pitching, he always sat in the high 80s. He never was a high-velocity pitcher. He was one of the softest tossers in all of baseball, but he was a Cy Young winner. And we can all vividly remember him on the Houston Astros that same Cy Young year, coming in to face Kendrys Morales in Game 5 of the ALDS, and Morales punished a hanging pitch, a 3-run bomb to put that game on ice. That year, though, he was incredibly dominant. And in fact, in Game 3 of that series, he shoved against the Royals and put them on the brink of elimination. And if they would have found a way to close out the game in the 8th and 9th in Game 4, Dallas Keuchel gets a chance to face that elite Toronto Blue Jays lineup and probably add to those accolades of the season he had already gotten. But he's no longer that guy. We all know that. We know that a 37-year-old Dallas Keuchel who's bounced around the league, has never really stuck anywhere since then, is going to be producing the same amount. But I did see people out there saying, well, this could mean that they're looking into trading Seth Lugo and they want to make sure they could turn to somebody to fill in the rotation. I never really saw Rich Hill as a permanent guy in the rotation if they were to move somebody. mainly because he's 45 years old. And if you are a team that's in wild card contention, turning to someone like Rich Hill is not in your best interest. Same goes for Dallas Keuchel here. As cool as it is for Omaha Storm Chasers fans to go out to the ballpark, go out to Werner Park and see Dallas Keuchel throw, I don't see him in a spot where he's going to replace Seth Lugo in the rotation or replace Michael Lorenzen. In my opinion, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit in the final segment of today's show, in my opinion, this is a move just for Omaha. And the same way it kind of was for Rich Hill as well. Like, you give him the opportunity. I'm not saying that Dallas Keuchel or Rich Hill could never get a shot in Kansas City. Who knows? They might get a spot start somewhere. They might come up and pitch out of the bullpen. But to ask them to be a mainstay in the rotation for the second half of the season, I just don't see the Royals doing that. This feels like there are no legitimate starters in Omaha, or at least guys that you feel have pretty good upside. I mean, they've got John Gant throwing down there. Rich Hill is in that rotation. Luinder Avila is still banged up, so he's not somebody that you can truly count on right now. Or he might have returned from the IL, but he just hasn't been the same guy since pre-injury. And then you look at a couple more names down there that just are not big league starting material. There are some relievers that maybe catch your eye. They pique your interest. Jonathan Bowen was one of those guys that pitched really well out of the bullpen and got a shot in Kansas City. Andrew Hoffman, another name to bring up. Evan Sisk was another name to bring up. We saw the way Steven Cruz pitched before he got called up, and he's been lights out for the Royals bullpen. When it comes to starting, though, they just don't have a lot of names there. And this is more so about getting depth there, having some insurance, guys that have major league experience that you might call on. But it was not a move, in my opinion. Again, it's one man's opinion here. It was not a move to say, this is the replacement for Seth Lugo who could be traded. This is the replacement for Michael Lorenzen if he were to be traded. The Royals clearly liked what they saw in that workout. The velocity seemed to be playing up a little bit. There were multiple other teams, I'm sure, though, watching that workout. And the Royals were the ones to give him the minor league deal, give him an opportunity to still pitch professionally and have a door slightly open for a shot again in Kansas City. I don't know if he would get a shot in a doubleheader maybe where he could be called up as a game 2 starter, or he gets called up to pitch out of the bullpen. I'll tell you this right now. I'd rather have Dallas Keuchel in the bullpen than Sam Long, just because Daniel Lynch is on the injured list, but you need another lefty out there. Evan Sisk has been roughed up his last couple of outings in Omaha. I'd still like to see him over Sam Long up there. I'd like to see Rich Hill in the bullpen over Sam Long, just to have a name there that would be interesting to watch when he would take the ball. It's no disrespect to Sam Long. He just has an ERA over 10, and he's pitching in blowout games, and I would just rather see some of these guys throw in those blowout moments than I would Sam Long. The bullpen, though, is going to need innings. That's where I could see a path opening up a little bit. To ask Rich Hill or Dallas Keuchel to be stretched out and start in the rotation, I think you are really stretching it here. Now, talking about stretching out someone to start, you're stretching it and asking those guys to be one of the 5 in a top rotation in all of baseball. This feels like the depth for Omaha. And if you go out there and trade Seth Lugo, you go out there and trade Michael Lorenzen, I understand that a bat is going to be the prize piece. Everybody wants them to trade Seth Lugo, if that were to be the case. If you were in the camp of keeping Seth Lugo, this doesn't apply to you. If they were to trade Seth Lugo, everyone's going to say, well, go get 2 bats, right? If you trade Michael Lorenzen, go get more bats. If you're trading Carlos Estevez, get him for bats. And that is somewhat true. I would say that they would target some offensive help. That seems to be the theme of this trade deadline. They also are going to need starting pitching. That's just the reality of the situation. If you are going to trade away someone that's pacing for just under 200 innings, has a sub-3 ERA, by far and away one of the top starters in the American League, you can't just say, well, we got Dallas Keuchel to take that spot, or we have Rich Hill to take that spot. There aren't options in Triple A to take Lugo or Lorenzen's spot. It's why when Cole Reagans and you look at Noah Cameron and Michael Lorenzen were all in the rotation still. It was right after that St. Louis series, and there was this, well, should they move Lorenzen to the bullpen? Should they go with the six-man rotation? They want to keep that core intact. Now, that's very obvious to me. If you get a deal you can't refuse, though, I can understand entertaining it. In that same conversation, you're going to need another starting pitcher in return. Because in the second half of the season, I don't see the Royals being completely out of it. And if you're going to trade Seth Lugo, you got to have the doors blown off. You got to be really blown away by a deal that makes a lot of sense for you now and moving forward. Alec Marsh has not thrown an inning this year. Kyle Wright is just not healthy enough and the numbers aren't there. Rich Hill is 45 years old and the numbers aren't there. Dallas Keuchel hasn't pitched this year. He's thrown some simulated games and pitched in front of scouts for a workout. He's, though, going to be throwing in Triple A Omaha, and I imagine he's going to stay there unless things get really dire up there in Kansas City. We will be circling back to this topic in the final segment today, but for our next topic, The Athletic put out an article on the 40 best trade chips and who the fits would be. The Royals were linked to 3 guys, and we're going to talk about those 3 guys next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to Open Phone. If you are running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency, like a burst pipe. If the plumber didn't answer, did you wait? Nope, you just called the next one. That's why having a reliable business line is so important, and that's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or your computer. Open Phone is offering Locked On Royals listeners 20% off on your 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. That's openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. I always try, as you guys know by now, to stay up to date on what's being said on The Athletic and what's being said over on ESPN. If there's a trade deadline article, you bet that I'm going to read it. And I'm going to go through every little piece there and see if the Royals pop up. And The Athletic put out an article this morning about the top 40 trade chips and the best fits. And I will say this, there's a lot of pitchers on that list. There are some outfielders that the Royals are not linked to. It does not mean that the Royals aren't interested. These are just established writers that are saying the best fits. And keep in mind, like in Kansas City, we should be saying, well, they should be linked to every available outfielder because they need outfield help. They need offensive help. These guys are also covering 30 other teams or 29 other teams. They're going to look at another situation and say, hey, maybe those teams need an outfielder more than the Royals. And the Royals are still 45 and 48, not a definitive buyer by any means. So I was pleasantly surprised to see the Royals still seen as a fit for a handful of outfielders. These aren't the perfect options. I can tell you this, though. Amongst all those pitchers and all those closers, the outfielders that were available, there are good names. There are also names that are just going to have an absurd asking price. So if you are a Jarren Duran fan or you're a Wilyer Abreu fan in Boston, those are 2 names that are very unlikely to be moved. I believe there was a report out there today that they are not actively shopping them, but if they were to be blown away by a deal, they would certainly listen to that offer. I'm not going into the deadline, though, thinking that they are going to be dealt because they don't need to deal either of those guys. And the Red Sox are 2 games over 500, only a game or 2 back of a wild card spot. So the names the Royals were linked to, Adolis Garcia of the Texas Rangers. And let me be clear, linked to, I should probably say a fit. So these are writers that are giving their opinion. It's not that the Royals are actively talking to the Rangers about Adolis Garcia. It was just the possibility of that guy being traded, the likelihood of him, being sought after by other teams and who those teams would be. So I'm going to say a fit now instead of being linked to. So the Royals were seen as a fit for Adolis Garcia in Texas. On the year, he's slashing 229, 275, 382 with an 88 OPS plus. That's 12 points below league average, but a 1.6 WAR because of how good defensively he is. We know all about his postseason heroics in 2023. We know all about the swagger. We know all about the power, though he has just 10 home runs this year. And the Rangers are a team that are neck and neck with the Royals. Kansas City swept them, but Adolis Garcia is a piece in their lineup they would need to get a decent return on. You would have him for this year, and I want to say next year as well. And he's been not very good the last 2 years. You would add some thunder to the middle of your order. Not a sure thing, though. And the outfielders that are available and I see as likely to be dealt, none of them are perfect solutions. I really do believe that. Even the Taylor Wards, the Cedric Mullins, they all come with their bumps. They all come with their lumps, I should say. And the guys that are the top names are the above league average bats. You're going to need to trade away a lot to get those players. So for these three that are mentioned as fits for the Royals, you're going to turn away at them. I'm going to say that you were going to hear these names and say, those are not great players. Those are not guys that would make the team significantly better. It's the outfield market, though. It's just not as great as it's been in years past. So Adolis Garcia is one of those names. The next name that was seen as a fit for the Royals, Alec Thomas, who the Royals just saw in Arizona. He's slashing 241, 291 with a 361 slug and 81 OPS plus, 19 points below league average, and a .2 WAR. He is someone that, like Adolis Garcia, had some postseason heroics in 2023. He's a good defender. He's incredibly quick. Not a middle-of-the-order bat. But when you look at Royals outfielders and what they look for, they want the speed combination. They want the good defense. They want to be able to have a guy that can put the ball in play. It just feels very Kyle Isbell to me. You wouldn't be trading for Alec Thomas when you already have Kyle Isbell. And though your defense would have a boost, if they were to acquire a left fielder, having Kyle Isbell in center and Alec Thomas in left doesn't really do that. It does not boost your offense a whole lot. And Arizona is still one of those teams I'm on the fence about. I don't know if they're a buyer. I don't know if they're a seller. If the Royals were to go to Arizona and ask about a player, I hope it'd be Eugenio Suarez. And you could DH him a lot in this lineup. Garcia can move around a little bit, though I'd like to keep him at third base. But on days where Suarez would play third, maybe you'd move Garcia back to second and you would DH Jonathan India. So he was the second name that was seen as a fit for the Royal. And then, surprise, surprise, Brian Reynolds was seen as the last fit for the Royals, hitting 226, 291, 374 with an 84 OPS plus and a negative 0.7 WAR. Why they are seen as fits? They're all outfielders. That's the obvious one. They're also not experiencing great seasons. And though that's going to come across as unpopular to the Royals fans listening, which I imagine is all of you, these guys could be in the price range because of how they have played in the first half. If you went to the Red Sox asking about Jarren Duran and Wilyer Abreu, and I know they have Roman Anthony and they have Rafaela playing out there in the outfield, well, you say, well, Jarren Duran doesn't really have a spot there because Wilyer Abreu is playing in right field. Where are you going to play Duran if all three of those guys are playing every single day? Well, if they're still going to move him, this is someone that had a near 9 WAR last year. That's still an incredibly valuable player. And someone who's having a lesser year, still not a bad one. So just because there's a roster crunch in Boston, it doesn't mean that they're just going to unload him because they don't have a spot for him. They're still going to need to be blown away by a deal because they can make it work with Abreu and Duran and Anthony and Rafael out there. They traded away Rafael Devers. They trade away Jarren Duran. Now you're really starting to wonder what Boston's plan is for the future. Now they've played well. They've played over 500 ball since trading away Devers. But trading away Abreu and Duran, I believe, would actively tank that style of play. So these guys, Garcia, Thomas, Reynolds, they're on teams that are either unsure of buying or selling, or they're on a team that is going to be selling. And they're not having the best of years, so you can't leverage that if you are the seller. If you are Texas and you feel that you are falling out of it and you want to trade away Adolis Garcia while he might still have some value, you can't ask for the world because he's just not putting up the numbers he was in 2023. With Alec Thomas, same exact thing. He's not putting up incredible numbers where you could go to the Royals and say, well, we want Carter Jensen or Blake Mitchell. You can't do that. He hasn't put up good enough numbers. Brian Reynolds, same exact things. He got the big contract, and he was hitting well before the last 2 to 3 series here. But if you're the Pirates, you don't have that leverage anymore. He's hitting 229. And if you're the Royals and you want to have a slight upgrade and someone that could take off in the second half, these are the type of moves that feel more likely than throwing the house or the kitchen sink at Jarren Duran or Wilyer Abreu. Because Boston's looking at you and saying, we don't want to trade with a team that's right on our heels that could have a hot second half. If we're going to trade any of these guys, it's going to be the National League where we don't have to worry about them. It's why they went to San Francisco with Devers. It's easier to make that trade with someone in the National League so you don't get burned by that player from a team that's chasing you. So I would say those three. I don't know if the Royals are talking to those teams about those players. I know in Ken Rosenthal's report last week, I want to say, or maybe 2 weeks ago, that it wasn't just Brian Reynolds that they were looking at. Maybe it was these two names as well. But I go back to when the Royals traded away Whit Merrifield and when they traded away Scott Barlow, when they had some guys with marginal value, but you had to unload them. None of these guys, those teams have to unload, so they could hang on to them and hope for a bounce back next year. The Royals just didn't have the same leverage anymore when they traded Whit Merrifield or when they traded Scott Barlow. They were not having the best of seasons. Still, there are going to be teams calling about those players. The value is just much less than it was last year or the year before that. Let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's circle back to that starting pitching talk. Who could they go out there and target if they do choose to trade Seth Lugo or Michael Lorenzen? That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can catch us on wherever you listen to your podcast. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. For my picks today, let's just stay with the Royals and the Pirates. I'm going to take the over on strikeouts for Chris Bubich. Pirates have just not hit really anybody well this year, but left-handers specifically. Chris Bubich in his final start of the first half, I expect him to dominate as the Royals will pick up the sweep. So let's just go with the money line pick here. I am going to take the Royals to win tonight over Bailey Falter and the Pirates, and that will be a clean sweep of Pittsburgh before taking on the New York Mets. Again, this team is in the midst of a hot stretch. They've played well over the last week, or I should say a week and a half. Doesn't mean everything. It has gotten them back into the conversation just a little bit. I do need to say, because I brought this up on my very laggy and poor connection Royals postcast on Monday, you can't really be focusing about the wild card race right now. Focus on your record. Focus on the teams you're playing. And if you get back to 500 or slightly above that, now we can have that conversation. And if the Royals do that, it doesn't rule out them trading Seth Lugo. The Royals could be absolutely in the hunt a game or two back, and they still deal Seth Lugo because they might feel that with a few more bats and this offense kicking it into gear, that they can still go on a run in the second half without Seth Lugo. I find it being unlikely because he's pretty much a guaranteed quality start every time out. We also saw it with the Tigers last year. And for those asking about can the Royals pull a 2024 Tigers and get really hot in the second half, it's possible. The Tigers were a unique team, though. They were so banged up all season long. Like, they very well should have been a playoff team that entire year. They just didn't have anybody healthy. I mean, everybody was banged up. They still had Skubal throwing the way that he was, but they couldn't get much offense because all their star players were either struggling or they were hurt. Then everybody got healthy at the right time and they went on a tear. But they traded away Jack Flaherty. And I'm sure Tigers fans at the time felt like you can't really make a run in the second half if you don't have Skubal and Flaherty. And they got Trey Sweeney and a prospect in return, and that Tigers team did something historic. If the Royals were to trade Seth Lugo, yes, I do expect it to be for a bat. A bat will be involved in that deal. I also think they desperately need starting pitching too. And that's even if that guy's in Triple A, if he's in the bullpen but could maybe move to the rotation, they have to get one. If it's Seth Lugo or if it's Michael Lorenzen. The three teams I have had highlighted on my desk here for 2 weeks: Toronto, Chicago, and the Dodgers. I should say the Cubs at that. Those are the three teams I am looking at when it comes to starting pitching help. All three of those teams are definitive buyers. We know they are going to be calling about Seth Lugo if they haven't already. So who are some options that would make sense? I told you about Ben Brown yesterday, and here's why I would say the guys I am mentioning are not going to be great numbers guys. They're going to have poor seasons, is because if you're still going to acquire a good bat and you want to get a starter, there's going to have to be, some issues there. And not issues in the way of injuries or his coachability, nothing like that. Just more so the numbers. If you're going to acquire a top bat or one of their better bats in the system, and then you say, well, I want another starter as well because we're trading away Seth Lugo, you can't get the cream of the crop. You can't get their number one hitter and their number one pitcher. No, so you got to ask yourself, is it more important to get a proven hitter or a proven pitcher? I know my answer. I would want it to be a proven hitter. So with the Cubs, you look at Ben Brown, who struggled mightily this year, has a 6+ ERA in Chicago, but got demoted down to Triple A Iowa. He's one of those names where I go, would the Cubs even be willing to listen? Would they be willing to move him? I mean, he really struggled before he got demoted. But he's a name that I look at and say, would you be willing to take that on? And with the Royals pitching development, I really don't care what the numbers say. I don't need someone with a 2.50 ERA to tell me that they're good. I want to know why you're acquiring somebody with a 6+ ERA, one that's blocked. Because his last start in Chicago came on June 23rd. Now, he's a big frame, 6'6", 210. He's a younger arm, too. I mean, you're talking about somebody who's only 25 years old, but the Cubs just don't have him in the rotation right now. And if they were to deal him away for Seth Lugo, I feel that could be maybe a win-win for both sides. Still, it's not a one-for-one trade. You still would be going out there and trying to be getting, another bat there. I mean, last year, Ben Brown had a 3.58 ERA in 15 games pitched. So this year, in 16 games pitched, he just wasn't as good. But prior to getting lit up by St. Louis, he threw 5 innings, a 2-run ball against Milwaukee back on June 17th, 7 innings of 2-run ball against the Tigers, 6 shutout innings against the Reds. So there were good outings. He just got bombed in a handful of them, like against Cincinnati on the road, like against Miami on the road, Philly on the road, and St. Louis on the road. There was some volatility to it. He's a name, though, that I think would be interesting. I have no idea if the Cubs would even be willing to move him because he's somebody I'm sure they value pretty well. I think they look at him and say, what he did last year, he could still do again at some point. This year just didn't work out. They're in a different spot, though. They're in a spot that they're trying to win the World Series. And does he help them this year? Probably not. Seth Lugo could. And that's where the Rangers made the decision with Reagans. Is Reagans going to help us get there? No, but Aroldis Chapman could, and it worked out for them. So I'd be very curious if the Royals talk to the Cubs trying to get a hitter, if not another one, and then throw in someone like Ben Brown. I think it could make a little bit of sense. Now I go over to the Blue Jays. They're another team that make a lot of sense to me. I don't see them getting Trey Yesevich. That's one of the top prospects in their system. Ricky Tiedemann, no, that's another guy they really, really like. I would look to someone more like Adam Macko, someone who's in AAA with Buffalo, not great numbers, ranked 14th in their system. These are the type of names I'm bringing up. And even if it's not an immediate replacement up in Kansas City, you have another name in AAA that you can be working with. Because in Omaha, there are no names, starters, they would be working with. Avila was that guy. He's just not healthy. Rich Hill, Dallas Keuchel, John Gant, those are all guys over the age of 30, and one guy's 45. So those can't be looked at as the next wave of pitchers. If they go out there and acquire someone that's got a 5+ ERA in AAA, okay. Cole Reagans did as well when he was down there. What was that, AAA Round Rock, I believe? Or maybe that was AA. I can't quite remember. The numbers weren't great. And the Royals saw something. They developed him, and he turned into an absolute stud last year and the year before that. This year has just been battling injuries. Those are the names, though, I'd keep an eye out for. The ones that are in Triple A, the 24-year-olds, the 25-year-olds. Then I go over to the Dodgers there, and some names that could make sense. There's a couple guys in their 10 to 20 range. You got Nick Frasso, and I believe this year in OKC, he's got a 5.71 ERA and 24 games, but just 7 starts. The numbers don't look great, but that's a 24-year-old or 26-year-old, excuse me, that you could get innings in Kansas City if you feel you've seen something there. You also have Edgardo Henriquez. That's another name that might pop to you. So those guys that have the timeline of debuting this year, they just can't crack it where they're at. That feels like a sweet spot for the Royals. And with this pitching development, I'm not going to rule out anything. They could see a spin rate on somebody and disregard the ERA. They could see a guy and go, he needs this pitch, a slider, or maybe he needs a cutter, maybe he needs a changeup, and you work with that this year, and you could find a hidden gem. But I strongly believe if they trade Seth Lugo or Michael Lorenzen to one of those teams, you got to be looking for one of those guys that's blocked, that's not at the big league level, but is ready to pitch right now. If there's any names out there that you like, let us know in the YouTube comments below. I'd be fascinated to get to them tomorrow and probably in our Mailbag Friday as well. But that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Before we say goodbye, I want to tell you about MLB Game Night. But first, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out the Locked On MLB Game Night team. Every game, every night, all season long, get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we are going to be wrapping up this Pirate series and looking ahead to the Mets over the weekend. But until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.